crimes of looting, plundering, and enslavement of the country's native and African peoples. In October last year, Obrador's immediate successor, President Claudia Sheinbaum, repeated the call for reparation and demanded an apology from Spain. She refused, in fact, to invite Spain, the Spanish government, to her inauguration ceremony unless Spain responded. And Spain, in fact, did respond and say they were not going to apologize. Now, shortly after that address, on the 14th day of October last year, Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, said, and I quote him here, "Venezuela, together with a group of Latin American countries, wants to make a profound claim for Spain to pay reparations for the theft, the looting of the lands, and the slavery and suffering endured by our indigenous and African ancestors," unquote. Last year, the Trinidad and Tobago National Committee on Reparations also began calling out Spain publicly for similar crimes committed in this country and in the wider region. From various accounts, the Caribbean was heavily populated and well endowed with gold, silver, copper, pearls, and hardwoods, and other natural resources before the arrival of Christopher Columbus. Or should I say Columbus? And he, of course, you know the date of his arrival, 1492. But within the lifetime of the first invaders and colonizers, and I call them invaders, some islands were completely deeper number. From earliest descriptions, the island that used to be called, and sometimes still by some people, Hispaniola, which is the second largest island, was also heavily populated. One historian of the 16th century, Francisco Lopez de Gomara, attested that Columbus consolidated his conquest of Hispaniola by distributing more than 1 million natives among his brothers, the soldiers and settlers of the crown. That system, of course, we know as the repartimiento, that some people also equate with encomienda, but the actual process of dividing up was called repartimiento. This claim gives credence to an estimated population of 3 million people by Bartolomé de las Casas, who also was a contemporary of Columbus. By 1508, the population had declined to 16,000, 60,000, and by 1514 to just 40,000. By 1570, only 2 villages from the time of Columbus's arrival had survived, 2 villages. Some islands in the Bahamas and later Barbados were completely depopulated from violence, slave raiding, and forced removal to the larger islands. Las Casas estimated that the Bahamas contained approximately 500,000 people they described at the time as Lucayans. 40 years later, he described the islands as laid bare, waste, and uninhabited. The native population of the Greater Antilles was nearing extinction well before the first European-born viruses struck the region. In other words, what we're saying is diseases had nothing to do with the genocide and the depopulation as taught in many schools, that diseases wipe out the people. And Tony Martin has dealt with that very extensively, so I'm not going into the details of the disease, but we note the population did not, and irreversible. And there's a reason for that. The Caribbean lacked the capacity for recovery because of the tiny pockets of survivals in some of the islands. And these survivals were increasingly corralled by plantation development. Racism underpinned the savagery of the violence that was meted out to the natives who defended their sovereignty and tried to dislodge the invaders from their land. These heroes were branded by the Spaniards cannibales, and various terms meaning the same thing, cannibals. According to Las Casas, cannibales were, quote unquote, those who eat human flesh in some islands, end quote. But the truth is that they were all engaged in collective resistance to the Spanish invasion and Spanish violence. And because of that, they were branded as cannibals. The monarchs of Spain condemned and decreed that these people must be captured. These cannibals, Cubagua and Margarita, these are north of Venezuela.